Welcome to day 3 of the ESOMAR Insights Festival. Today I've chosen a topic which is Innovate or Renovate. And let me start with a story. March 10, 1888. It was a gorgeous Saturday in New York City. On Saturday evening, the city's meteorologist predicted more fair weather, followed by a spot of rain. Meanwhile, two storms converged. The moisture from the Gulf of Mexico collided with the cold front coming from the Great Lakes over New York City. Residents awoke on Monday to the worst blizzard in U.S. history. By Thursday morning, the storm had dumped more than 50 inches of snow in parts of the Northeast. This is 127 centimeters. Snowdrifts were blown into formations 50 feet high. This is 15 meters. Food deliveries were suspended. Hundreds died of exposure and starvation. It was not just a natural disaster, it was also a psychological blow. The great machine of New York seized up and went silent. Its nascent electrical system failed. Industries stopped operating. The elevated railway service broke down completely. The streetcars were useless. The suburban railways were blocked. Telegraph communications were cut. The mayor didn't visit his office and the city was left to run itself. Chaos was around. How did New York City react to this disaster? To protect its most important elements of infrastructure from the weather, New York realized it had to put them underground. First, it buried the wires. In early 1889, telegraph, telephone, and utility companies were given 90 days to get rid of all their visible infrastructure. New York's industrial forest of utility poles was cleared, allowing some residents to see the street outside their windows for the first time in their lives. Underground pipelines proved cheaper to maintain, and they could fit more bandwidth, which ultimately meant more telephones and more electricity. Second, and even more important, New York buried its elevated trains, creating the country's most famous subway system. Just the year before the blizzard, the elevated rails saw an increase of 13 million passengers. So the need for some alternative form of transportation was more than obvious. London had opened the first part of its subway system several decades earlier. So in New York, the blizzard was the trigger. New York did not react to the blizzard of 1888 by stockpiling snow shovels. It created an entire infrastructure of subterranean power and transit. So, innovate or renovate? COVID is our very global blizzard. The New York City of 1888 decided to radically innovate and transform the city into a totally new city. Because this was what the city needed. And the authorities and citizens were smart enough to understand it and define the consequent actions. Having New York had all their infrastructure already buried, what would have their reaction been? Maybe, and only maybe, only renovation would have been needed. Today we face the same question. And we must be smart enough to understand whether we need a radical transformation or just a renovation. By the way, I took this New York City story from an excellent article by Derek Thompson published in The Atlantic's October's issue. Let's keep redrawing our maps. Enjoy day 3 of the ESOMAR Insights Festival.